Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of the Ball Talk Media NFL Show. We're back after a pretty long hiatus, somewhat on purpose, somewhat not really. Obviously, it's been a little bit since the NFL draft. That's pretty much what the premise of today's episode is going to be. We're busy with our real lives, but we're done with school, ready to get going on this content. First, to kick off this episode, we did have some trade news yesterday, which, as we know, the NFL news cycle post-draft can be a little dry, but so this is something to actually get to talk about, and that's the George Pickens trade to the Dallas Cowboys from the Pittsburgh Steelers, something that I did post a little short reaction on all the Ball Talk Media networks yesterday, and we'll talk about it a little bit right now. This was a move, personally, that I saw coming. Just another reminder, I am a Steelers fan. CJ is a Bears fan. We'll be open about our fandom here. Even before the DK Metcalf trade, there had been some reporting on the Pittsburgh local media side that George Pickens wasn't a slam dunk guy to get a contract extension, which this is the offseason where rookies in his class could get extended, and he is a free agent after this season. And as good as he is and as talented as he is, there's always been some doubt that he would be a long-term piece in Pittsburgh because of being repeatedly late to practices and meetings and even games sometimes. And then obviously we see it on the field with his attitude. And honestly, it's kind of a strange thing. You may or may not agree with me on this, but see, so Pickens obviously falls into that category of the diva receivers that we see. We see a lot of them. But I think it was John Ledyard, who does a great job covering the Steelers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers I follow him on Twitter. He was saying this, and I completely agree. I think it was the perfect way to describe Pickens. He's not the type of diva receiver that's begging for the ball, who's pouting on the sideline that he's not getting the ball. It's just almost like he's in his own world. It's like when George Pickens plays football, he's not playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's playing for George Pickens. And I'm not talking about not getting the ball. I'm just talking about all the times where in the middle of the play, Russell Wilson throws a ball to the middle of the field, and George Pickens is over on the left sideline, and the camera pans over to Freiermuth trying to catch something over the middle, and George Pickens is in a fist fight with the DB, or he's pancaking him into the ground. He's in his own world, and he shows up to the game, he plays, and if the Steelers win or the Steelers lose, it doesn't bother him either way. He just keeps moving on with his day. It's just, he's a really strange character, that's for sure. But that's just not the type of guy. I mean, if you give a guy like Pickens, who we talked about all his problems with just responsibility and maturity, if you give that guy a long-term extension and pay him a bunch of money, you just got to think, what type of message does that send to the rest of your locker room? And I think that's ultimately what it came down to for Pittsburgh. And so they make the decision to move him. And that was after they made the DK trade. And I think that trade made it even easier to see that this is possible, just because they are redundant with one another. It's not really the ideal receiver duo with their play styles. And so they move into Dallas. So what do you think of move on to you for this? What do you think of the return here? So just a reminder, Dallas gave up a third-round pick for 2026, and then I believe it was a fifth for 27, and the Steelers tagged on a sixth in 27 with Pickens. And another caveat here is if Pickens does leave Dallas after this 1 year, then the Cowboys will receive a third-round compensatory pick. So this is a very low-risk move for Dallas. So what do you think of it for both teams in the package perspective, just what each team got back?
Yeah, I see it as a win-win for both sides personally.
Yeah, 1000%.
Because Pittsburgh, when you just look at like George Pickens' numbers the first 3 seasons, and you look at his age, he's I think 23, 24, somewhere
Very
around.
young, yeah.
Yeah, he's very young. But of course, you got to factor in he's George Pickens. At the end of the day, he's kind of crazy.
Kind of
For
the stretch.
Pittsburgh, yeah, for Pittsburgh, I like the deal for Pittsburgh because I think that you got probably what you're going to get the most out of with George Pickens
definitely
through 3 seasons. And I think, of course, like you said, they weren't going to extend him long term. They just traded for DK Metcalf, getting a third-round pick out of it, a day 2 pick, and then a swap of day 3 picks. I think it's fine for Pittsburgh, and they'll probably go in that draft and draft somebody that'll be a starter for the next 4 years. And for Dallas, of course, it's low risk for them because it's a third-round pick at the end of the day for a guy that's coming off of 2 1,000-yard seasons or borderline 1,000 yards.
Pretty much with subpar to average quarterback play.
Yeah,
Russ was much better than Rudolph, but in that Pickett-Rudolph year, the second year of Pickens' career, he got to 1,000 yards with Rudolph and Pickett throwing him the football.
And of course, they promoted Brian Schottenheimer to be their head coach. And when you look at their offseason moves, they really didn't do anything in the receiving room. They let Brandon Cooks walk, but other than that, it's the exact same group as last year. It's CeeDee Lamb, and then it's a bunch of guys like Jalen Tolbert, Jonathan Mingo, stuff like that. So for Dallas,
I think that was gonna be the 3 receivers on their depth chart had they not made this trade,
yeah. So for
which is
Dallas,
crazy.
I like the move for Dallas. Of course, like you said, they really aren't going to lose that big of draft capital because if he leaves and goes and signs somewhere, which he will because he's that good, they get back their third round pick.
Yeah.
So I don't see a problem with it for Dallas, and I think it's a good move for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think it's a great move. I love it for Dallas, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously, as a fan of the team, giving the player up. If I were on the flip side, if I were Cowboys fans, I'd be pumped about this.
Yeah.
And I think it's just beyond that. I think it's a perfect fit in what they're trying to do. I think him playing opposite of a guy like Lamb, who's more of a yak guy, he's going to separate and get open, and he's able to run the full route tree. I think Pickens, who's primarily a jump ball guy, contested catch guy, is going to complement that very well. And that's not something that Pickens had the luxury of in Pittsburgh. He didn't have anybody really complimenting him to make him better and get him more open targets. So yeah, I love it. I'm interested to see how the season goes. Obviously, can Pickens grow up a little bit, so to say? And
Mm-hmm.
it is disappointing it's the way it went in Pittsburgh. I am glad, though, just from a fan's point of view, I am glad we ended up getting a third for him because the reporting on this move was that really up until the late night before it happened, no one was really budging on that day 2 pick. The only offers Pittsburgh was getting was day 3 stuff, and obviously Pickens' talent doesn't match up with that. It's just all the other stuff, non off the field football stuff that even on the field that we've talked about. And yeah, I think it's a win-win move. The only thing I do question on the Pittsburgh side of things, it's not really anything with the deal. It's just the other process that they've gone with this offseason around the deal. Like that, we didn't use any of our draft. We didn't draft receiver in this year's draft, and I had to think that we figured that this move was going to happen. This didn't just come up in the last week or so.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. And specifically with that 4th round pick, that maybe we'll get into this when we start our next segment on this show. But our 4th round pick we used on Jack Sawyer, and as you know, with the Steelers, we got T.J. Watt, have Alex Highsmith, they have Nick Herbig. It's a very strong group of 3 edge rushers, and they went and took another one that it was Terrell Austin or Carl Dunbar. Whoever had the media session after that pick did explicitly state that we saw this as like a guy that's going to come in and play the run well, be a good run defender. And so it's just like it's kind of weird. They took that 4th round pick and sought out a very specific role and took that player, more of like drafting for needs rather than best player on the board, which I disagree with. And that's honestly, it's a little different than what Omar Khan's done in all his drafts so far for Pittsburgh. So we'll see how that pick plays out. But Alec Ayamaner, a guy from Stanford who I may bring up in this show, was a guy that I really wanted the Steelers to draft, and he was there on the board. So I don't know how much work they did on him. Who knows? I don't know everything, but
Yeah.
that was the guy that I would have liked to see the pick there. And the Steelers were very interested in Matthew Golden, but I think they were zeroed in on Derek Harmon the whole time at that
Mm-hmm.
1st round pick, which I'm not happy. I'm not complaining about at all. I think that was a great pick. I think that fills a very big need. So yeah, with that already leaking into some draft stuff a little bit, we'll move on. We're going to do our NFL draft superlatives on here. So I got 7 categories that CJ and I are going to go through. We're each going to have some picks for each one, and thought this was just a fun way to talk about the draft and talk about what picks we may have liked, what we may not have liked, rather than just doing a traditional, back and forth on talking about whoever freestyle. I thought this would be a fun way to do it. So the first one that we're going to start with is our best value selection. So this is the player, regardless of where they were picked. This could be anywhere. Who we thought was the best value pick in the draft. So I'll start with you. Who did you have for your best value pick?
So I had 2 secondary players that I was torn between, but at the end of the day, I went with a guy that I was very high on. I'm sure you're very high on too because you've watched this dude throughout his 3 seasons at Michigan. It's Will Johnson at pick 47 to the Arizona Cardinals. And of course, the reason that he fell is that a bunch of general managers think that he won't be able to play on the outside because of his speed and like lack of athleticism, you could say. Also, the knee injury. The knee injury was looked at as a big deal, but I think that it's very high risk, of course, because it's a top 50 pick at the end of the day. But Will Johnson was so good in college that if Arizona hits on this, they got a guy that's probably going to be a top 10 player in this class at pick 47. Of course, they added Walter Nolan in the 1st round. I really like what Jonathan Gannon and his crew and Monty did in this draft specifically for Arizona. So, yeah, Will Johnson's my guy. And my other guy was Malachi Starks, which I'm sure he was one of your guys
Oh,
probably.
yeah, I love Starks. Of course, he goes to Baltimore.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
such a
pick 27 out of
yeah.
anything too. But yeah, Will Johnson's my guy. So
Well, if you didn't say him, I was probably going to say him. So, but I figured you would. So, that's
mhm.
why I had multiple prepared. But yeah, I really agree with that. That 2023 Will Johnson season, that was special.
Yeah,
I can't get that out of my head. And obviously, especially down the stretch of the season, we all got to watch a lot of Michigan because they did, of course, win the national championship that season. And yeah, it was that could end up being a real steal. I mean, obviously, there was a bunch of, like you said, a bunch of factors that went into him falling that far.
yeah,
This next one is a guy I think we saw very similarly on this one. It's also a corner. It's also a tall, long corner. I'm into those.
mhm.
Um, so my pick for this best value pick was Savone Revel Jr., who went in the third round to the Dallas Cowboys, and pretty much it was all because he tore his ACL in college. Now I understand that's scary, especially with a position like corner where you need that fluidity and that athleticism to be successful. But this is a guy that was probably going to go in the first round had that injury not happened. And
Mhm.
Dallas ends up getting him in the third round. And I love his play style skill set. I can see 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", tall, long arm corner that's going to be very good in press man. It's just a big upside swing, and a guy that I liked a lot before he got hurt with East Carolina. He's out of East Carolina this season. So yeah, that was my pick. Obviously a couple corners. We each saw the same pretty much on that. And the other one that I really thought about here that he could fit in another category later, but I think the obvious one that most people think about is Shador. Shador Sanders went in the
Yeah,
fifth round to Cleveland. I really just wanted to I probably should have said this before we did this category, but I was really just thinking besides Shador because I think
yeah, pretty much.
it's
Yeah,
pretty obvious. Like Shador, okay, Shador in the fifth. I don't care what you think about him. That's a good pick because that's a
it's
guy that has
awesome value.
that's a guy that has the chance to be a starter for many years in the NFL. At what level that's questionable, but I think the thing with that pick, I just think it's more the fact that Cleveland doubled up at quarterback. I think that's what was weird about that. Like,
Mhm.
anyways, we'll save that for later. But yeah, just quick disclaimer: if it's Shador, probably is the best value pick. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to
for
go
sure.
anything besides him. We'll move on. We'll go. Now we're just gonna do the flip side. We'll do the worst value pick, and I had a couple guys for this. I'll just share one just in case you have the other one. But my worst value was Jackson Dart. And I think that maybe could be a little bit of a hot take. This was tough. There honestly wasn't a ton of guys that I really thought fit into this. And it's really more of I just had to pick somebody maybe to a sense. But Jackson Dart just wasn't a guy that I would have taken in the first round. And that's really all it came down to. It's
Yeah,
New York moved up back into the first round to get him. Now, had he gone in like the mid to late second round, probably wouldn't have him on here. It's just the fact they used a one on him, and it's a guy that I'm not going to sit here and say he can't be good in the NFL because I think that's unfair, really, to any quarterback prospect. It's just so hard to judge quarterbacks at the college level and say for sure whether they're going to translate or not. So I could be so wrong about this. This isn't me getting on here and saying I don't think Jackson Dart's going to be good. You just got to remember these are draft takes a couple weeks after the draft, months before even training camp starts. So to be fair, we really don't know a ton. But Dart's a guy just coming out. The system he played in and the offensive environment he was in at Ole Miss, it was really more geared towards the college game, which you can't really blame him for that. I mean, Ole Miss was really good and they were trying to win games. They were going to do it, help them win games. And he can be able to learn about how to operate an NFL offense. I know talking about this, some people's minds probably go to that clip from the Gruden's QB class where he asked for snap count and Jackson Dart clapped. I'm not
yeah,
even talking about that. You can teach a quarterback a snap count fairly quickly. It's not. I think that clip got very overblown. It's just the whole concept of making pre-snap checks, making full field read progressions, which Ole Miss was very RPO heavy, shot play heavy, just running a lot of two route reads, and it's not like this is some surefire like franchise potential to be a franchise guy that New York traded up for in round one. And there's definitely been worse picks in the past for sure. Like I just thought this whole draft in general, there wasn't a ton of reaches. I didn't think.
hmm
So yeah, mine here was Jackson Dart, and it's not one I feel great about. But yeah, with that, you just share yours.
we kind of got the same wavelength going on, but mine is a different quarterback. My pick for the worst value is Tyler Shuck at pick 40 to the New
Yeah,
Orleans
no,
Saints.
that's not a bad one.
Yeah, and I know that you were a Tyler Shuck guy because you watched some of his All 22 and stuff like that, and you saw some stuff that you like. But I just got to get into the facts here. Tyler Shuck's going to be 26 years old this NFL season. Tyler Shuck has multiple knee injuries throughout his college career, and Tyler Shuck, up until this year, really didn't produce that much in college. I mean, he was a solid starting quarterback in college, but like, was he warranted of a top 40 pick? I didn't think so. So also, he goes to a situation in New Orleans that, let's be real, we're expecting New Orleans to probably pick first or in the top 5 next year because their roster is horrible. They have a first-year head coach in Kellen Moore. And at the end of the day, I thought there were better quarterbacks on the board. I mean, of course,
Agreed.
Shador, of course. But I probably would have liked the upside swing at Jalen Milroe more than just taking Tyler Shuck. And, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I had another name written down, but I don't know much about him. It was Isaac Tesla at 70th overall to the Lions. I don't know who he
Yeah.
is. And I
Yeah.
heard his
That's just
I heard
one where like the name is so what's the word? So obscure that it's kind of like, all right, wait a minute, is this really a reach or do they just know something I don't? And that's what makes you hesitant.
yeah.
My other option I was thinking about for this was Terrence Ferguson going in the second round of the Rams. But
hmm
this is also a case where like, all right, the Rams draft really well. I'm just going to trust whatever they do.
Yeah, and
But
that's
there
kind
was
of
a
what I want to do with Brad Holmes too. Like
yeah with
in
Detroit.
Detroit.
It's like at this point, Detroit's earned enough pedigree to be like, all right, man, like you got it, whatever you say.
Yeah.
No, but the Shuck one, yeah, like you said, I did. He put really nice tape out this season, and it was one of those things. If you just watched him play, if you just watched him like throw all the facts out the window, he looks awesome. But then you turn off the tape and you go do a little Google search, and you see that he's 26 and he's had 3 career-ending injuries in it. Yeah, like that's so. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. As much as I thought Shuck had a very good season, that's just you're definitely right. I mean, the age and the
Yeah.
injuries, it's a big deal. So a couple quarterbacks there for that one. Um, and then the next category we had was the most NFL ready player, and this one it's a little strange because obviously most of like the first round guys are going to be ready to play right away. I guess just more what I meant with this one was who were the guys where you just watched the games on Saturdays and were like, yep, that's it, like this is the guy. And I guess some good comparisons for that was like Brock Bowers at Georgia. Like
hmm
even from Brock Bowers' freshman year, when I turned on a Georgia game and I watched Brock Bowers play, I was like yep, that's a dude. Like I don't even have to overthink this or look at his testing numbers or anything like that. So that's kind of what I was getting at here. And mine for this one, I was torn between two top 10 picks, but I went with Ashton Genty from Boise State.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not too big of a hot take. That's not what we're here to do. We're not here to make hot takes. He was the best running back in college football, and there's really not enough. There's not a whole lot I have to say. I mean, just turn on the games and watch the guy play. I mean, I'm sure if you're watching this podcast, then you're a deep cut enough fan of football to know who Ashton Genty is and how good he was. It's the contact balance, the body control, the shiftiness, the running through tackles, tackle breaking ability, the speed. I mean, everything. He's one of the best running back prospects I've ever seen. He's drawn comparisons to LaDainian Tomlinson, and honestly, rightfully so. As hefty as that is, he was unbelievable, and I just see him stepping into the Raiders' back. Very quietly, the Raiders' offense could be very fun. That could be something we
hmm
talk about on a future episode. But he's stepping into this Raiders team that's going to be much improved on that side of the football, and I'm really excited to watch how that plays out. So Genty was my pick for the most NFL ready prospect in this year's class.
Yeah, 100%. I was hoping, of course, Genty was there at 10 for Chicago, and
Yeah,
it really felt like that if Chicago was ever going to get him, they were going to have to trade up. And when Jacksonville traded up and Cleveland picked at 5, it had the writing on the wall. Genty was going 6 to Vegas. They weren't going to let him pass. For my pick, I'm going with a guy that we mentioned earlier, Malachi Starks, at pick 20.
I like that.
Going from the football factory in Georgia to one of the NFL football factories in Baltimore. He's going to pair up alongside Kyle Hamilton and just be in a secondary that's already pretty loaded, I would say. And when all you got to do is just cut on the film, dude. Just go watch a Georgia football game in 2023, 2024, and you're going to see Malachi Starks all over the place. He was playing out of position last year, which is why his numbers were down and his productivity was down and all that stuff. But he's playing nickel corner, and he had to play boundary sometimes. And this dude's going to be a safety in the NFL. At least I would hope so. And yeah, I just think
He's gonna
that
be a dang
Malachi,
good one too.
Like,
they're gonna have him and Kyle Hamilton together, and that's scary.
yeah, we could be talking about this duo in the next 3 years as the best in football.
One
Hamilton and
thousand, yeah,
Starks. Yeah.
1,000%.
So I don't really have too much to say. When you draft a player from Georgia that played on that awesome defense, chances are he's going to be good. So Malachi Starks.
Yeah. I'll keep it going with Starks because the next category is the most on-brand pick, and mine is Malachi Starks by the Baltimore Ravens.
I add that down too.
And it's just because like this happens every year where Baltimore's picking between 26 and 32 because they always make the playoffs and win a game, and some awesome player drops down to him for whatever reason, whether it's, oh, we play safety, so he's not valuable, or oh, we play center, so he's not valuable, or he doesn't run a good enough 40, or he has off the field issues, or whatever it is. They just always end up getting some great player. They got Tyler Linderbaum at 25 a few years back. They got Kyle Hamilton at, what was it? I don't even remember.
It was in the teens.
It was in the teens, but they got Kyle Hamilton, who I personally thought that year he was one of the 5 to 10 best prospects in the entire draft. And then same thing this year with Malachi Starks, who I would have had top, I don't know, 12 to 15, maybe even top 10 had I ranked just straight up ranked players, which I didn't get around to doing that this year. But this reminds me a lot of the Brian Branch situation when Detroit got to draft him in the second round. It was one of those things where when you watch Brian Branch play, it's kind of like the NFL ready thing, and you had the same answer with Malachi Starks. When I watched Brian Branch play at Alabama, I just like, yep, that's the guy. He's gonna play for 10 years, and he's gonna be great. And I saw the same exact thing with Starks. Maybe not quite to that level. I'm not trying to sit here and say Malachi Starks is going to be Brian Branch because Brian Branch is one of the best DBs in the NFL today. He might be a top 3 DB right now, and such hefty expectations. But Starks fell all the way to 27 to the Ravens just because people or GMs could have been scared off by the testing numbers or the positional value or whatever it is. But he's too good of a football player, and he's very versatile. And that's the other thing that I really like about DBs is versatility. That's also another reason I was a huge fan of Jahdae Barron, who went to Denver at pick 20. I think he's going to be a really good player. But yeah, Baltimore always seems to be getting away with this, where they just get whoever. And honestly, they did it again in the second round this draft. They got I might be stealing yours, but they got Mike Green in the second round, which that was for off the field issues. Obviously, we aren't going to go into that too much, but that's another one that could end up just being like, well, duh, of course they took him.
Yeah, I thought about writing down Mike Green, but I didn't want to get into Mike Green fell for an obvious reason.
Yeah,
and I just don't want to talk about that. For my on-brand pick, I went with Tyler Booker at pick 12 to the Dallas Cowboys. They do it every year, man.
The Cowboys fans think they're getting this awesome skill position player every year in a lineman, and it's like it's really funny because it's not even a bad pick.
No, not at all. And it works like majority of the time for Dallas.
Yeah.
You look at when they build these great offensive lines and they get these great defensive players, it works. But I think we were all expecting wide receiver. And when Matt Golden was on the board at pick 12, and we were like, oh, he went to Texas. He's
hook 'em horns,
a Houston native, stuff like
Texas
that. Like
forever.
it just made 100% sense. But nope, they go with Tyler Booker, the guy that says that he loves to make people sad playing football and wants to crush their dreams, which I would want in an interior offensive lineman in the NFL.
Some of the lineman vibes in this year's class are the best I've ever seen. Between him and Will Campbell.
Will Campbell saying he's going to die on the
this lineman class might be unreal just based off of pure vibes. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I need more personality in these offensive linemen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but Tyler Booker's my pick. He had an awesome career at Alabama, and there's no doubt that I think that he's going to step in and play left guard or right guard, whichever one, for the Dallas Cowboys offensive line and be one of those 10-year starters like Zach Martin and Tyron Smith were. So
yeah. We talked about NFL readiness already. As far as that goes, I think one specific thing for Booker is coming in as a run blocker. I think he just has a chance to come in and be super dominant. He was so good at Alabama. He's a big dude, but he can also move for his size. Alabama used him so much on a lot of pin and pull and power runs with Jalen Milroe, where he was one of the pullers, and he would get out in space and really run out in front of Jalen Milroe and go block for him. And it's pretty scary seeing a guy like Jalen Milroe run behind Tyler Booker on the move. I think that's a way Dallas could really get him settled in and work and running the football. Another guy I had that I thought about for this with another safety was Nick Ebenwari for the Seahawks. They took him in the second round, and I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that he has a similar build to Cam Chancellor, and obviously Cam Chancellor played in Seattle, so that kind of just helps out a little bit. But I also think he's just a perfect player for the McDonald's scheme. Like he has a chance to a sense be his Seattle version of Kyle Hamilton. Obviously, maybe not as good as Kyle Hamilton because Kyle Hamilton is great, but it's one when we did a mock at some point, and I had him going in the first round at 18 or 19 to Seattle, just more of a somewhat surprise pick. Didn't go that high. They took Gray Zabel, but they were able to get him in the second round, and I thought it was great.
Yeah.
And it is just very fitting. I thought the whole process that fit even more in Seattle was a great fit.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move on. Next one I had was the best late round pick / sleeper pick. So this could be a guy that was on day 3 and maybe even in the 6th or 7th round, or maybe just a pick, even if it's maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round that some folks weren't talking about a whole lot. I kind of have 2 for this, and it's because I wanted to do one that was literally I have a couple 7th rounders, and then one guy that was earlier on day 3. We'll start with the 7th rounder. I had Brashard Smith, who went to Kansas City. Kansas City, you're right. I was just making sure. I was like 95% sure. But yeah, Kansas City, Brashard Smith goes there in the 7th round. And then this was honestly just somewhat of a product of the depth of the running back class. I think we talked about in our very first episode just how deep this class was. And it's crazy that players like that are dropping to the 7th, because he's a guy at SMU he was just very good, very fun to watch, very explosive. And I just think any time you can get a guy that has a chance to just be a difference maker on offense, be a big play threat like that, in the 7th round, I think that could be a pick that ends up being really good. And honestly, like, the success rate for late round running backs is way higher than any other position, so that could just be like an easy little pick here. Isaiah Pacheco was a 7th round pick for Kansas City, so they're all too familiar with this method, so to speak, of 7th round running backs. Then the other one that I thought was very good, I've already brought up his name once, but it's Elike Manor by the Titans in the 4th round out of Stanford, wide receiver out of Stanford. I think it's that guy has a chance to be really good. I think the thing everybody's going to remember with him, or maybe you don't remember if you don't know who Elike Manor is, he was the guy who snatched Travis Hunter's chain in the 2023 season. It was that crazy Friday night, Thursday, Friday. It was a weeknight game. I remember being up late watching that, and he went off. There was a play he mossed on Travis Hunter for the game-winning go-ahead touchdown and had 200-plus yards. It was one of the best single-game college individual receiving performances I've ever seen, and it was against the player who went number 2 overall in this draft. Which, that's not a slight to Travis Hunter. That's just me trying to say how good Elike Manor is in it. And that's just one game, but even outside of that, it's a guy that he has very good size, great contested catch ability, put up some good production over his time, and it was a guy that I honestly thought had the chance to go on day 2 in the 2nd or 3rd round, and he ends up falling to Tennessee in the 4th. And I think that could be great. Obviously, they need help at that spot. And even though Cam Ward does allegedly think Treylon Burks and Calvin Ridley is a top 5 receiver duo in the NFL, he says, we all believe that Cam Ward actually thinks Treylon Burks is that guy. But no, Elike Manor could definitely be what they wanted Treylon Burks to be, to an extent. Who'd you have for this one?
All right, my sleeper had to go a little biased here. I had Rutgers running back Kyle Monangai.
I don't even hate 200. Yeah. The 7th round running backs are just really easy to pick for this.
Yep. He was first team All Big Ten this past year alongside Caleb Johnson at Iowa, which your Steelers picked. Mm-hmm. And Monangai, when you turn on the film, you see contact balance. I mean, other than Ashton Jeanty, he's probably the best in the class, and he went in the 7th round, just showing how good this running back class is. And the reason I say this is a sleeper pick is because you look at the Bears' backfield, it's wide open right now. DeAndre Swift, very disappointing season last year. Barely over, I think, 3.5 yards a carry, which is bad. Which is very bad in the NFL.
Horrible.
And yeah,
so what about the O-line play? But that's still not great.
Yeah, and then Roschon Johnson's the other back in that offense. Which, I mean, Roschon Johnson, when he plays, he runs with fury, and he'll run over some people, but he can't stay healthy. He's missed I think 10 games in his NFL career, and he's only played 2 seasons. So Kyle Monangai is going to fall into this Bears offense, and he reminds me a lot of David Montgomery. And of course, we know how good David Montgomery was in a Ben Johnson offense alongside his Lightning, which was Jahmyr Gibbs, and we're expecting it to be DeAndre Swift in this offense. which of course Ben Johnson has familiarity with. But yeah, I think Monungai could be a steal, or I mean, he could be one of those guys that don't even make the roster and he bounces on the practice squad. But I think that it's a dart throw by Ryan Poles in this front office, and I really do think it could pan out for them because of
Yeah,
just how good this running
for
back class
sure.
was.
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of seventh round running back success stories, and there has a chance to be plenty more out of this year's class because it's one of the deeper classes we've ever seen. Monaghan is one of the most underrated players in college football over the last 2 years for obvious reasons, just because he played at Rutgers. I mean, let's be honest. How many of us were watching Rutgers on our Saturdays, especially us being from the South? We were probably, unfortunately, we did not get around to watching a ton of Rutgers football. Apologies to Greg Schiano and Scarlet
Not
Knights.
familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll move on. This one, we brought up Shador a little bit earlier. These are going to be our favorite quarterback selections. You know, quarterback's a position that gets talked about the most every year during the draft process. It was only right that it got its own category on this edition of Draft Superlatives. So I think just another quick disclaimer. I mean, Shador Sanders is probably the obvious answer for this, depending on what, obviously, people have. There's so many polarizing opinions on Shador Sanders. But as far as just, I guess, objective value goes, like objectively, that was a great pick.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess outside of that one, you brought him up earlier. This is going to be the guy that I guess I'll officially go with this, and it was Jalen Milroe.
Milroe.
Yeah, it's Jalen Milroe. That was my favorite quarterback selection in the third round. And let me be clear by saying this: I'm not a Jalen Milroe fan. All right, I'm not going to get on here and say that I think he's going to even be a quality starter, because honestly, he's probably not going to be. But this was a quarterback class that was, quite frankly, just bad. There wasn't a lot of, I mean, outside of Cam Ward, it was just a bunch of whatever, honestly, to me. But it's the fact that when you just rank these guys based off pure upside, Jalen Milroe might be number one. If anything, number two at the lowest. And Seattle got that guy in the third round. And I think anytime you can get, a guy that, let's be real, very small, very small. Anytime you have a guy that has a sliver of a chance of being a franchise quarterback, keep him very microscopical, maybe even with Jalen Milroe. Microscopical chance of being a franchise quarterback. But they got him in the third round, and let's just get crazy for a second and say he is a horrible quarterback. This dude's an incredible athlete, world-class athlete with Jalen Milroe between his measurables and his speed, athletic ability. So who knows? Maybe he can carve out a role in the NFL some way, somehow. But honestly, and this is just another one, kind of like the worst value. Like, I had to pick someone. I'm not in love with any of these guys, to be quite honest with you. I wasn't even the biggest fan of Cam Ward at 1, which, like, I understand that was, I'm not going to criticize them too much. I mean, the Titans need a quarterback and they have number 1. How many times are you going to pick at number 1? So that's
exactly
completely understandable. Like, it's hard to disagree with that, but it was honestly hard for me, if I were a GM, to pass on Travis Hunter if I had the first pick in this year's draft, even if I was in the Titans' position. But yeah, the other one that I thought about here was just kind of being a little biased, was Will Howard in the 6th round, and it's another one like I don't. Will Howard's probably not going to be a starting quarterback, but he's 6'4", 230. Just had a great year at Ohio State, and one thing I like about him coming from Ohio State, there's been this stigma with the Ohio State quarterbacks that they come out and they're just not pro ready because they don't have to do a whole lot, and in that offense, because of the talent they have and the fact that they pretty much only have to make one read and let it rip, aka Justin Fields. But this was an Ohio State offense ran by Chip Kelly at Ohio State this season, who has plenty of experience play calling in the NFL and at the college level, and he's pretty much running a pro-style offense at Ohio State. So as far as the operational stuff goes, Will Howard might be the most pro-ready in that aspect coming out, just because of his offensive coordinator in college. And so that was another reason that, just out of all of these, I didn't mind the Will Howard pick in the 6th round for Pittsburgh.
Yep. All right. Favorite quarterback pick. You already know who I'm going with. My boy, Jackson Dart, at 25th overall to the New York Giants in a trade up. And the reason it is because Jackson Dart right now is not built to play in the NFL right now. If you threw Jackson Dart into week 1 for the New York Giants, he would not be the quarterback of the New York Giants at the end of the season. He wouldn't be. He would get benched. But if I'm going to trust any single offensive play caller in the NFL to develop Jackson Dart, one of the ones at the very top would be Brian Dable.
I love it.
I've seen it before.
I absolutely love it. I know what I said about Jackson Dart earlier, but this Dayball point, I love it. I'll continue.
Yeah. I've seen it before with Josh Allen. that he developed this big quarterback that's got a solid arm, which Josh Allen's arm is way better than Jackson Dart's. But Jackson Dart still has a good arm, and he's a guy that has the rushing ability and not just straight line speed. A guy that's going to run over NFL defenders, and that's what Josh Allen's doing right now in the NFL, and that's what Jackson Dart did in college because he refuses to slide. As an Ole Miss fan, I wish he would, but yeah, I love the pick for New York. I love the fit, and I like it especially because when Jackson Dart through the whole pre-draft process, I heard maybe New Orleans would draft him at 9, maybe Seattle would draft him, Cleveland, somebody like that. And I was thinking, well, if any of those teams draft him other than Seattle, Jackson Dart's probably going to have to play in year 1 of the NFL, and that's the one thing that you don't want with Jackson Dart. And in New York, you have Russell Wilson, who just completed a whole season with Pittsburgh, as you know. And even if Russell Wilson goes down, you've got Jameis Winston. And Jameis Winston's probably one of the 5 or 10 best backup quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah.
So Jackson Dart has no expectation to play this season, and he could just sit, develop. And I like it for Joe Shane and Brian Dable too, because it really helps him with job security. Because even if New York goes out and they win 6-7 games or something like that this year, they can fall back and say, well, we drafted Jackson Dart. Just let one season of Jackson Dart play out, and if he sucks, then you can fire us. So I like the pick for New York, and I like the fit, especially for Jackson Dart. And Ole Miss quarterbacks typically don't miss in New York, so we'll see.
1 for 1.
Yeah,
Big sample size there. Yeah, because I talked about it earlier. I already said, I didn't like the pick, and it's more having to do with the player. Honestly, just coming out right now, and like I said, I'm not a big fan of any of these quarterbacks. So, but I do think you bring up a good point. I think there's a lot of folks who really thought Joe Shane and Brian Dable should be out of a job right now, and maybe Joe Shane, that's fair to say. I don't know. But Brian Dable, I'm not going to punish that dude because of. Let's just go back to
Daniel Jones.
Yeah, the Giants made the. Let's just go back though. They made the playoffs. They win a playoff game against Minnesota, and Daniel Jones is competent for a season, and gets that big extension, and then he's bad again. But the most competent football Daniel Jones has ever played was with Brian Dable. Yeah, first year together. And the Giants haven't been bad because Brian Dable is the head coach. They haven't been bad because Daniel Jones is their quarterback, and their offensive line also hasn't been very good, among a bunch of other problems. But like I said, I think it was very, very unfair to try and scapegoat Brian Dable for pretty much anything that's not his fault. And I think I'm with you. If there's any coach in the NFL that a rookie quarterback could go to and have a chance to develop and succeed, I mean, Dable is on that short list of guys I would want to develop a guy like Jackson Dart. So, like, I'm not completely out on Dart. I know what I said about him earlier, but yeah, New York is. It might sound crazy saying New York is a team that he could succeed with, because I guess like maybe the illusion you get about New York is they're not very good right now, and Malik Neighbors is pretty much the only guy there to catch the ball. But it's really more of a coaching thing there. So yeah. That one was tough. The favorite QB, just, we've talked about it so much, how weak this class was. And honestly, that's just based all of pre-draft opinion. I mean, who knows? Maybe these guys come into the league and light it up. But it's just not something that I foresee happening. So we got one more that we're going to get to here before we wrap things up. And it's most surprising pick. I got a couple names down. I'll let you start us off on this one. Who were you most surprised about in this year's NFL draft? And I know whoever it was nowhere near as surprising as Michael Penix Jr. in the first round of the Falcons last year. That might be the most surprising one of all time. So who was it for you this year?
Honestly, it was my own team. It was Colston Loveland at pick 10. And I think it's not because Colston Loveland's a bad player, it's a reach or anything like that. It's just we all thought Tyler Warren was the best tight end in the draft class. And I mean, I see the fit, of course, with Colston Loveland. I mean, he looks a lot like Sam Laporta when you turn on the tape. And we all know Ben Johnson loved Sam Laporta in
That's
Detroit.
not racially motivated. A quick disclaimer.
Oh, no.
Right,
did not mean that at all. But yeah, Loveland was a surprising pick. I like the pick overall, and I think that he'll contribute day one in Chicago alongside Cole Kmet. And that was another big reason. I just didn't think the Bears were going to take tight end, because I know the city of Chicago and Ryan Poles, they love Cole Kmet, and Cole Kmet's a good football player at the end of the day. He is. He's an average to above average tight end. But I think when you have the chance to run 12 personnel and have a receiving threat, a big slot, somebody like Colston Loveland, you do it. Because Cole Kmet isn't this big vertical threat. He's a guy he's an inline tight end at the end of the day. So yeah, Loveland was the surprising pick for me because I thought if they would pick tight end, it would be Tyler Warren. And I just didn't even think they'd pick tight end. I thought that they'd pick defensive end or edge rusher or offensive tackle. So yeah, Loveland's fine.
Yeah, that's I do want to stay on the topic of Chicago real quick, and it's the fact I think we talked about it on a prior episode. Chicago, right when this offseason started, y'all went right away, boom, 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 filled in those 3 interior offensive line positions by trade and free agency with Joe Tooney, Drew Dalman, and Jonah Jackson. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought now throw that pick in there between those 4 acquisitions. I think that's a great process by Ryan Poles. And what I mean by this is going into the free agency and the trade market to fill your needs, I think is the way to do it. And that way, when you get to the draft, you're not necessarily using the 10th overall pick for a need. You're using the 10th overall pick for who you think is one of the best players on the board. And I think that's what this Colston Loveland pick was. Let's be honest. Tight end probably wasn't the number 1 need for the Chicago Bears going into the 10th pick. But when you take into account their draft board and just what they thought of the prospects, they obviously think very highly of Colston Loveland. And because of their prior work in the offseason, they were able to get him at 10. They didn't have to take a guy to play guard because they already went ahead and took care of that. And I love that. I think that's a great way to build a team. But, however, with my Nets pick, I did think they went a little far with that process by taking Luther Burden in the second round, who was I'm going to stay with Chicago here. I'm going to say that was my most surprising pick of the draft was when I was watching the second round and I saw Luther Burden's name flash across the screen next to the Chicago Bears logo. That's not something I expected to happen at all.
Yeah.
Because Chicago already has DJ Moore locked up long term. They drafted Rome Odunze in the 9th overall last year. And then Keenan Allen's gone. But even then, especially now when you use that first round pick on a pass catcher on Colston Loveland, and then you already have Kmet on the team. I mean, you essentially already have your 3 receivers. You have your 3 pass catchers. And then they took another one in the second round, which is like, all right, let's be real. Luther Burden, pretty crazy. Maybe not crazy, but I thought it was shocking a little bit that he dropped to the second round. I mean, maybe late first is what I thought for him, but him making it to the second round is not something that a lot of people saw happening, especially before the college season started. And this is obviously, to me, just one of those deals where it's not like Chicago had this pick come up and think, oh, we need a receiver. Let's get the best receiver. It's just the fact they had Luther Burden high enough on their board to once he dropped that far, it was just like, well, we have no choice. He's way up there. Like they could have had him top 12 or top 10, whatever. And it's because of, like we said, the same process. They just drafted the best player available to them. They didn't necessarily draft for a need there. And I was shocked. I mean, if it works, it's great. Like there is a very good chance that Luther Burden is pretty good, and Chicago's DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Luther Burden on their team, and that's great. But I don't know. I mean, it just seemed very unlikely Chicago was going to go pass catcher in the first 2 rounds of the draft. I don't think that's something neither you or I had on our bingo cards going in.
Yeah, it was very odd. And I will say this to kind of defend the Luther Burden. I mean, it's not a bad pick because we don't know. Luther Burden hadn't played a snap
That's
in
what
the
I'm
NFL.
saying. Like, the player is good enough where I'm not going to sit here and call it a bad pick. I was just surprised.
Yeah, but I will say this. I really do feel that their pick got sniped a couple picks before them because Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson both went before their 39th overall pick. And right when Henderson went, they traded down, like instantly.
Yeah.
So
No,
I
think
think
that's
that they
very
were going to
fair.
pick one of them.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think they definitely were too. Which I really like the Henderson pick for doing it. I like Henderson a lot. I mean, I like both the Ohio State running backs. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Fair point. They did trade down right when both of those runners went off the board. Another one, you brought him up earlier, but Isaac Tesla for Detroit. That was like, wow. I did not see.
I don't know who he is, so yeah, I was surprised.
He played for Arkansas with Andrew Armstrong, who I thought was going to be the first Arkansas receiver to get drafted. And Tesla went in the 3rd round, and I watched multiple Arkansas games this year, and I noticed him out there, but it was never a guy that really caught my eye or really showed any huge flashes. I do believe he's about 6'4", and he ran in the high 4.3s, low 4.4s. So I think anytime you get that combo of height and speed, I mean, that that's going to boost up your stock a little bit. And just another thing with that pick, as we've already said, he went to Detroit, so obviously they probably know what they're doing here.
He's got that Dan Campbell grit.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised that dude in 5 years is playing in an 18-degree weather Week 15 game in Lambeau Field and has blood on his face and is just an absolute dog for the Detroit Lions.
Dude named Isaac, bro.
In the NFC North, like that, yeah. But that was pretty surprised. I mean, I watched a lot of SEC football this year. Knew who Isaac Tesla was. Did not expect him to be going in the third round of the NFL draft.
Yeah, day 2's insane.
Yeah. I think that's going to wrap it up. Do you have anything else you wanted to add on to anything in general? Just any other thoughts?
Just in general, I thought that I didn't see too many surprising things happen in this draft.
I really agree. Like there wasn't, the chaos wasn't really there, which, it's cool. It's not like I never go into the draft expecting chaos. Like, I just think if you do that, it's you're just going to get let down. Which, I mean, Jacksonville trading up to 2, that was something.
That was crazy.
That was crazy. But it's like, it's not like it wasn't some stunner. I mean, it had been something we had heard about leading up to it. I do like on that trade. I just disagree with Cleveland doing it. I thought Cleveland should have just stayed put and taken Travis Hunter. Yeah. Like, I think Travis Hunter's incredible. So I think the fact that they traded down and lost out on that, I don't know. We'll see how that pans out. But yeah, other than that, like we said, it was pretty just fair, solid, chalky type of draft.
Mm-hmm. Other than, I mean, the Shedeur Sanders thing was kind of crazy, which everybody that follows the NFL thought that too. I mean, I had some of my dad's friends who are very casual NFL friends were asking him. They were like, "You see, Shedeur Sanders is still on the board," and of course, everybody knows him because he's Deion Sanders' kid and he's huge in college football. But other than that, it was a pretty straightforward draft class.
Yeah, I know we've been pretty much just shooing off the whole Shedeur story. There's been so much talk about that, and the draft feels like forever ago at this point. I mean, if you want to hear Shedeur Sanders talk a bit, it's out there. I promise you. We don't want to fill your ears with any more of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we do acknowledge that was wild. Yeah, that's going to do it for us today, though. We'll wrap it up. We do have the NBA show going on. We just started. We're having a good time with that one. We're going to try and get that one out more consistently. Now that we're deeper into the playoffs, there's less games going on, so there's more time to talk about stuff between games. And we're going to try and kick up the content a little more this summer now. Like I said, all of us, everybody, me, all the other co-hosts, we're all done with school, so we're going to have some more time on our hands to record and just get content out across all platforms, and we're looking forward to it. You can go follow all the